Yes, I actually have 18 children's books from my bookshelf. These are all books that I read and loved as a child. I'm not going to talk about each one and every book because I'm actually splitting them into 9 separate authors. So why am I talking about children's books today? Well, Christmas is coming soon-ish, so you might be starting to think about gifts for kids, the kids in your life, children, nephews, grandchildren, etc., etc. I know there'll be plenty of new books, authors coming up, for Christmas, and I'm sure that there are lots and lots of lovely new children's books, but this is books from my bookshelf, and I want to talk about classic children's books. And, they're classics because they have stood the test of time. So why not have a look at some of the best loved children's books and consider if the children in your life have not read them, then why not open up their world into classic children's literature. Now, these, as I say, are from my bookshelf. They are books that I have kept with me all my life since I left home. There are a few missing. I don't know what happened to them, some of my beloved books, including my whole collection of Winnie the Pooh. So I'm sorry about that because I absolutely adore Winnie the Pooh. But there you go. I can't find them. But I mean, who doesn't love Winnie the Pooh? Now, my first author, I'm going to get this done pretty quickly because if you've watched my videos before, you'll probably guess who I'm going to start with. And this is my collection of the Chronicles of Narnia by C.S. Lewis. You can see how old they are, and all of these books I have had from my childhood days. You may have seen the films. Children in your life may have seen the films. They only did 3, The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe, Prince Caspian and The Voyage of the Dawn Treader. But of course there are 7 chronicles kind of telling the whole history of Narnia and its relationship with children from our world. And it's a completely different fantasy world that they enter in various ways in all the different books. And they usually are called there to save Narnia from some danger or to help out in some way. And of course there's the wonderful, all the inhabitants of Narnia mostly are talking animals, and most children love the idea of talking animals. These were my very, very favourite books when I was a child. Now, of course, at the time, these were bought for me individually, starting off with The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe, and then Prince Caspian and so on. But of course, you can buy them as a box set now. So that is a really good idea. If your kids have not read the Chronicles of Narnia and they like fantasy, then a box set of the Chronicles of Narnia would make a marvellous Christmas present. With the sort of slightly younger age group, I think the next absolutely beloved books of mine from when I was little were the 101 Dalmatians by Dodie Smith, and also Starlight Barking. There was also one called Twilight Barking, which seems to have disappeared from my collection. But everybody knows 101 Dalmatians because several films have been made of it. It is a lovely book, especially for any children who love animals, who love dogs. It tells the tale of a couple of dogs, Pongo and Mrs., I think, if I remember rightly. Yes, and their puppies who they have to rescue from the evil hands of Cruella de Vil, who wants to make them all into fur coats. So, come here, a bit scary, but it's a great story. It's a great story. And I absolutely loved that as a child. So 101 Dalmatians is one good, or you could buy all 3 of her books about the dogs. I really like the Starlight barking as well. That was a lovely one. Pongo and Mrs. Wake up one morning to discover that every living thing is in a deep sleep except the dogs. And this is only the beginning of some very strange happenings. So not one that is as well known as 101 Dalmatians, so you might want to look into that. There's the 3 books there, plus the Twilight barking. Next on my list, I used to love these books. Again, books for children who love animals. It's the story of Dr. Dolittle. If you know about Dr. Dolittle, he learnt the language of all the animals, so he was able to talk to the animals, a bit different from the animals talking. But he learnt their language, and I used to love these books. I only have the one left, all the others have disappeared, but there are several of them. And of course, again, there have been films made of them. And just a little side track here. When I was little, I loved books so much. I was a member of the Puffin Club. I don't know whether the Puffin Club still exists, or even if Puffin books still exist. But they were a subsidiary of Penguin, and they had this little Puffin logo. And I used to so look forward every month to getting their newsletter with all the different books coming out. And I used to run to my parents and say, I want this one, I want this one. And they had lots of things like book plates you could put in your book. So I had these little book plates. It said "From the Library of," and you can see my whole childish hand with my name there. A lot of my childhood books have those book plates in. But yeah, I used to love the Puffin Club. So that is Dr. Dolittle. Next we will go to one of my favourite books as a child. Well, it was actually 5 Children and It by E. Nesbit, and sadly that one is missing too, but I do still have The Phoenix and the Carpet, which is actually the same 5 children. Now, of course, E. Nesbit also wrote The Railway Children, which I also had a copy of at some point. I absolutely love The Railway Children, and I absolutely adored the film with Jenny Agutter. It was so lovely. It always made me cry when she sees her father in the mist. It's so lovely. But I digress. I absolutely loved the E. Nesbit books, the five Children and It, and The Phoenix and the Carpet. It's about the adventures of 5 children, and of course it's very Edwardian. E. Nesbit was writing 1904, so they're Edwardian children. And with 5 Children and It, they find this strange creature who gives them wishes, and each chapter is about each wish that they have and how it lands them in all sorts of troubles, and it's great fun. And The Phoenix and the Carpet is about a carpet they find, inside of which is an egg that hatches into a phoenix, and they go on adventures on this magic carpet. There was also a 3rd book called The Story of the Amulet, which I've actually just seen that, and I'd completely forgotten about that, so I read that as well. So 3 great books by E. Nesbit about these 5 children. Of course, E. Nesbit, we tend to just go to The Railway Children, which is a lovely book, but you shouldn't forget these. These were lovely, great books. So if you've never come across these, and you that sounds like something kids in your life would like, then maybe a box set of those 3. They're good fun. Just going on, I think, to slightly older children. Now, A Little Women was one of my favourite books as a child, and of course Good Wives. Now, all the films of Little Women tend to include both those books. It's Little Women and Good Wives. But did you know that Louisa M. Alcott also wrote a book called Little Men? And this is the story of Jo March's children and the children that she adopts in her school that I think she mentions it at the end of Good Wives, where she says she wants to set up a school for orphaned boys. And that is the story. And that's a little known one. To be honest, I can't remember much about it. It's in my bookshelf. I don't know where my Little Women is. I know I have a really old copy of Little Women somewhere, a hardback, but I've been rummaging around and I can't find it. So, but Little Women, Good Wives and Little Men are great books for older girls, even young teenage girls, especially those who might be interested in sort of more historical novels about children and set in America, of course. And lovely books about just family and the difficulties of girls growing up in a fairly poor household, and all their kind of desires and wants and difficulties, and it's poignant and sad in parts as well. No spoilers if you haven't read it. In a kind of similar vein of Little Women is a much lesser known book and rhyme. These are really old books too. And it's What Katie Did by Susan Coolidge and What Katie Did Next. Isn't that lovely, that cover? These books, I don't know who gave them to me. I just remember having them as a child. They must have come down from my mother, but there's an inscription from somebody called Gladys Outney there, dated 1914. Nobody I know. So where my mother got these books, I don't know. But that is rather lovely, isn't it? And now What Katie Did, again, it's set in America, and it's a kind of coming of age again kind of book, and it's about a girl. In What Katie Did, she starts out quite young. She's called Katie Carr, and it's just all the sort of troubles she gets into. And she also, she goes off to, in fact, this one encompasses what Katie did, and then it's what Katie did at school. So she goes off to a boarding school, and that covers all the adventures she has in boarding school. And then there's What Katie Did Next. And it's rather lovely. She has a friend called a sister called Clover, very much about their relationship, and she has a best friend at school called Rosebud. It's just a sort of lovely coming of age. What Katie Did Next is their adventures as they get older and develop into womanhood, and they're lovely. Obviously, an older period, very, very different from the lives of girls now, but they're just lovely books about relationships. So, timeless, really, in many ways. And I just really loved them when I was young. They were really lovely stories. Now, some more fantasy books for those children in your life who really love fantasy. And these are a little bit more sophisticated than the C.S. Lewis books. So a little bit more for the older child who likes a bit of dark, scary fantasy. And they're the books of Alan Garner. And there were 3 I read. There was The Weird Stone of Brisingamen. I didn't know how you pronounce that. The ones I still have with me are The Moon of Gomrath and Elidor. Now, Elidor was one of my favourites. It's pretty dark. It's 4 children. They go exploring the back streets of Manchester. They chase a lost ball into a ruined church and find themselves in Elidor, the green isle of the shadow of the stars, but a land condemned to darkness and fear. And they have to save Elidor, of course. They have to find 4 treasures. I remember that. It was Yeah, really, really good. And, I think the Alan Garner books really kind of cemented for me. I mean, there was C.S. Lewis and then there was Alan Garner. And they kind of cemented for me the love of fantasy books. And The Moon of Gomrath, again, is... I think it's a successor to The Weird Stone of Bryce Engerman. They call the wizard Cadelin and meet the Lord of the Elves. Susan has to give up her magic bracelet, but then she falls into terrible danger, and Colin has to invoke the old magic to save her. It is wild magic from the beginning of time, and more of it is released when Susan and Colin light a fire on the beacon on the eve of Gomrath, and a band of horsemen rides out of the flames. Great stuff, great stuff. Definitely much darker than the C.S. Lewis book, so just beware of that. And so for those kids who really love fantasy, those are great. Alan Garner was a brilliant writer. Now, another one for children who love animals, and one that I really loved as a child, was Tarka the Otter by Henry Williamson. A lovely book about the life of an otter. Really, really takes you into the kind of being an otter, really. And it's set in Devon. It's really very much for children over 10. It can be difficult reading at times because, you know, the life of wild animals is a pretty dangerous one, and it doesn't, you know, it doesn't hold back from that. He was quite realistic, but it is a really, really lovely read, and it's a great book for if you want to introduce children into the lives of animals and the countryside. And as it says at the beginning, it lets you live with Tarka and see at his level the wildlife of that stretch of Devon country which runs from Dartmoor to the sea. Yeah, definitely a good one for children over the age of 10. And lastly, another fantasy, and I think one of the most important, best and incredible fantasy writers ever. The author is Ursula Le Guin, and it's the Earthsea trilogy, which is her classic children's trilogy about it's about wizards. And so to give you an idea, if you've not come across Ursula Le Guin before, or The Wizard of Earthsea, she is an incredible fantasy. Most of her fantasy books were written for adults. This is the children's one. One of my favourite of hers is The Left Hand of Darkness, which is an adult novel. So if you want to look at her adult novels, The Left Hand of Darkness is pretty amazing. But The Wizard of Earthsea, it was my brother who introduced me to this, actually. He thought I would enjoy it, and he was quite right. Let me just read the back for you. As long ago as forever, and as far away as Elidor, there lived the Dragon Lord and Archmage Sparrowhawk, the greatest of the great wizards. He who, when still a youth, met with the evil Shadow Beast. He who later brought back the ring of Ereth Akbi from the tombs of Atuin. Basically, it's about a young mage called Ged who goes to a school for wizards. Sound familiar? Makes me wonder whether J.K. Rowling read these. But this is very much in a complete fantasy world, and it's about his adventures in Earthsea. It's very much kind of older children. I think I read this when I was a young teenager, probably about 13 or 14. Ursula Le Guin's prose is just very beautiful, and the story is very much about Ged's having to try and free himself from a shadow creature that gets released when he gets into an argument with another student. It's a great read. I absolutely loved it. That is a great book for all lovers of fantasy, whether children or adults, and a great introduction to Ursula Le Guin's work. So that's it. So those are the children's books that I have now in my bookshelf from my childhood. Of course, there are more recent classics such as the Harry Potter series and the wonderful, wonderful Philip Pullman's His Dark Materials trilogy. But I wanted to dig back into the much older books. As I said before, they stand the test of time and they can still be read today and enjoyed by all children. Most of these are either fantasy or animal lovers books. I'm sure that you can think of other classic children's books that you know, I'm sorry if I've missed anything that you've loved, but do let me know in the comments some of the classic children's books that you've loved, which might help other people to choose some books for Christmas, perhaps. And I will be doing some more Christmas lists soon. So that's it for now. So don't forget to... and I will see you again very soon. Bye for now.